In the late 1950s, Rio de Janeiro was expanding. Modern architecture was stretching the horizon line, and new concrete apartment blocks were rising rapidly along the coast. A young, middle-class generation was moving into these dense living spaces in neighborhoods like Copacabana and Ipanema, settling into a highly confined domestic lifestyle. Outside those apartments, the dominant sound of Brazil was traditional samba. It was ecstatic, physically massive, and built specifically to command the open street. The energy came from the sheer scale of neighborhood percussion sections, dozens of players locking into thundering drum polyrhythms, topped with grand, operatic vocal performances. The friction came down to simple acoustics. You cannot fit a booming street parade inside a small living room. This spatial limit left these young musicians feeling disconnected from the music of their parents. They needed an introspective sound, one that could actually exist comfortably within the walls of a modern apartment. To build that sound, they had to practice a radical act of subtraction. They looked at the dense architecture of samba and started pulling out the heavy infrastructure. They took away the bass drums and the rattling metal, choosing to value the silent spaces between the notes. A young, obsessively dedicated musician named João Gilberto locked himself away for months to figure out how to fill the acoustic vacuum they had created. He emerged with a technical reinvention of the acoustic guitar. He called it the violão-gago, or the stuttering guitar. Looking at this close-up of the instrument, Gilberto used the thick lower strings over the sound hole to completely split the functions of his right hand. His thumb isolated the steady, pulsing two-beat bass line that the traditional drums used to play. At the exact same time, he used his fingers on the thinner, treble nylon strings to pinch highly unpredictable chord patterns on the offbeats. By introducing this syncopated stutter, a single acoustic guitar was acting as both the driving drum kit and the harmonic canvas. Rhythm was only half of the equation. Across the ocean, another musical shift was taking place in the United States. The frantic tempos of American bebop were cooling down into what became West Coast cool jazz. Musicians were favoring relaxed tempos, deeply understated arrangements, and an air of emotional restraint. When these physical vinyl records made their way to the turntables of Rio, young Brazilians recognized a kindred spirit in that understatement. A brilliant young pianist and composer named Tom Jobim began absorbing these imported jazz records. Jobim blended classical European impressionism with jazz extensions. He replaced straightforward triads with complex, modified harmonies, diminished chords, and major sevenths. These highly nostalgic, unresolved chord structures perfectly matched the stuttering rhythm of Gilberto's guitar. It elevated the technique from a simple beat into a complete musical vocabulary. When you paired Jobim's sophisticated harmonies with Gilberto's stuttering rhythm and topped it with a vocal style that was whispered rather than sung, a distinct genre took shape. They called it bossa nova, which translates simply to new trend or new wave. Through an intersection of local constraints and imported cultures, these musicians proved that immense musical power does not require high volume. A deep emotional truth can be delivered in a whisper. This was brought to you by Notes and Silences. Thank you for listening.